Hello, my name is Alejandro Chicone, and today I'll be talking to you on how America should not have involved themselves in the Vietnam War. Now, the Vietnam War was a war fought by the north part of Vietnam and the south part of Vietnam, which America aided the south part of Vietnam and would help them, but years later would pull out. This caused a lot of lives to be taken away, which was unnecessary, and history could have changed. And we would all know why this war was different than all the other wars. The conflict started all the way back in World War II, where France still was occupying Vietnam, but after World War II, Vietnam would be free. But then they would divide themselves into North and South Vietnam because the North part wanted to be communist and the South wanted to be capitalist. Now, they wanted to unite Vietnam, but under their control. The south part of Vietnam would be supported by NATO, and countries would help out, such as America and England, and the north part of Vietnam would be supported by the USSR, with countries such as China and Russia. America involving themselves would soon prove to be pointless because soon Vietnam would be communist. The reason why America involved themselves because the president at the time, Lyndon B. Johnson, was afraid of the domino effect. The domino effect is when if one country becomes communist, will the rest follow? He did not want the spread of communism to be all over the Southeast Asia. This war had nothing to do with America, and it was not a U.S. concern. Yet, Vietnam becoming communist did not threaten America, and they still sent people to fight for the south part of Vietnam. Young men were sent to die because of the training because they would be training for a war that they were not fighting, and they weren't ready. And when they came back, they couldn't find work because even some of them were unworthy to work because they weren't smart enough, but yet they were old enough to go fight for their country. And they would be mistreated. People would call them killers because they would know what's going on back in Vietnam, yet it wasn't under their control on what they were doing. And back in America, people would even protest, saying they don't want to be drafted into the war and they wanted their troops to come back home. Even though Lyndon B. Johnson, the president, would send troops to the South Vietnam to fight, this war was unwinnable because of the tactics that the North Vietnamese would use, such as rat holes and the guerrilla combat that they fought with. Even with all the aid and fighting they have provided for the south part of Vietnam, all this would have been in vain because Vietnam would soon be communist, and other countries that were communist, even today, such as Laos, would fall under the communist regime. The advice that Lyndon B. Johnson was given was to not go to Vietnam, yet he still went, and not just young men were dying from this war, but civilians that were caught in the crossfire would have died. Both sides would have benefited if America did not intervene themselves. Sure, NATO's goal was to prevent the spread of communism, but this would prove to be a ruthless war, and a lot of lives could have been spared. And America should not have, sent their young men to die out there in war. Anyways, thank you for listening and taking the time to, learn about the Vietnam War, and I hope that you have a new perspective of the Vietnam War.